So there we go. So the meeting's been called to order. First item of business is to consider the extension of TID 1 for purposes of affordable housing. We've obviously had a number of discussions about this. This has been a priority item for us. Staff has been doing some work on this. Obviously, there's a lot of other things going on in the village. We just got through getting the TIF policy approved. That took a lot of work and effort. So Rebecca's here. We've got the memo. So maybe Rebecca, you can walk us through that and we can have a discussion about what the proposed action steps are here.
Happy to. In the memo, under the agenda item discussion, wanted to clarify and correct a statement that was made at a prior meeting that the village must use the last year's entire increment. So before we were under the impression that we could capture a specific amount, but we must, if we extend for 1 year, the entire year of increment must be captured. So that was primarily just a clarification. We also wanted to provide that the TIF law does not provide a deadline for using the funds. So it's potential for you to use some portion of it now and the rest at a later date as different or various projects present themselves. The definition of TIF law does not include any income limits, but affordable housing is defined as the cost a house will hold no more than 30% of the household's gross monthly income. So some municipalities conduct local surveys to gather the housing data to determine their definition of affordable. The Department of Revenue also provided a link to the HUD website, which defines low income limits by county. And so I provided you with the screenshot of the 30% income limits. Department of Revenue does not provide any advisement on what qualifies for affordable housing in a specific community. And all determinations were directed to be established using a local attorney and guidance from local economic development specialists. The village could rescind the TID extension resolution and revert funds back to taxing jurisdictions if there were no use of the funds for affordable housing in the future. There's no guidance in the TIF law if this should occur. However, the DOR advised that that would be the best practice. So stepping back a little bit, we had initially, when we strategic planned, we said that we were going to work on the discussion of amending the TID. Then we pivoted and redirected to TID policy because of the number of requests that we were obtaining at that time. So that just got approved on Monday. So now we're coming back to the discussion of amending the TID. In my discussion with other communities around the state who have extended their TIDs, it's evident that we're a small municipality with a limited staff size. However, we could continue to explore the utilization of the funds for affordable housing with the goal of developing a plan within 12 months that could meet both objectives, both providing for affordable housing, but then also staying within our administrative capabilities. The village board ultimately sits in the role of determining whether the TID is extended or not. So as a part of the discussion, I think it would also be helpful for the board to know if the CDA had a desire to work on this under the scope of you serving as the housing authority, you know, looking at housing and being active with the housing plans here in the village. So should you desire to proceed with extension, it would also be my recommendation that you request from the board their direction to be provided direction to work on it over the scope of the next 12 months.
I'm just not clear on what the advantage is of extending this for a year when we don't have a plan, a proposal yet, and what would be the trade-off to going ahead and closing the TID and then starting a new one when indeed we did have a proposal for some kind of housing that we want to support.
I had that same question with Mike as well, because I was thinking about that last night and wondering that, because related to that is also the issue of tax
Right.
funds, tax
Right.
revenue.
Right.
I remember we discussed that, God, it seems like, what, 12 months ago? Now, when we first started this, we were talking about how much, so I looked up last night how much tax revenue and tax dollars would come back to the village. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's about $2.5 million in revenue a year. And then there's also a little over $1 million of just funds that would come back and get distributed to the taxing entities if we close the TID. Is that right?
Just as a reminder, so again, there are, and I think it was in an email that Rebecca sent late last night.
Yesterday.
There's the 5 taxing entities. So in total, there's 2.5 million. The village would get 700,000 of that. The school, which is 28%. School district would get 44%,
Right.
which is 0.1 million. So agree with you, that's a lot of money and to the various districts, but it's just sort of specific to the village, it would get 700,000.
I think
Let me-
it,
and let me-
And I think,
So let me just,
if I could just
let me
keep
just-
make
I just
make
want to
my comment.
Mike's question first, just to,
Okay.
again, I think our thinking back, and I think it was 6, maybe 7 months ago, was, we have a goal of affordable housing. We've said that, the housing study defines that. That is clearly a goal of the village board, of the CDA, of everybody. And again, at a high level, I think at the time, to do that, you need funds, you need resources in order to do that. And so again, here was obviously TID 1 is closing. And so we have a window here of some possible funding that we could contemplate that could be used to accomplish that goal. Now, the window here, I think to some degree we were hopeful to maybe be a little further down the path and have more things defined. And for a whole host of reasons, that's not where we are. We are, still, I would say, at the conceptual question of philosophical question. Is this something we want to do? Do we want to? So at this point, it's sort of setting aside money for the purposes of a possible future initiative that could address affordable housing, and we could use these funds. So you're right, there is no specific at this point. We don't have that. There's not a lot of guidance from other communities, but we did answer some of the questions, right? There is no back end. The money, we could have that money sitting basically kind of in escrow as we work on a plan. And if at some point in the future, we decide there isn't anything that really works, we do have the capability of moving that money back to the taxing jurisdictions for them to take and use as they see fit. So, today's conversation, again, I guess is still at that philosophical, do we believe that is a viable option and worthy of a recommendation to the village board to, again, set aside this 1 year's revenue from the TID for purposes of a future project. So does that answer your question, Mike?
Not quite, because
Okay.
I was wondering what the advantage to doing this and holding this money back from the various taxing bodies, including Shorewood, in a time of economic downturn versus when there was a proposal being able to create a TID. So what I don't get the advantage of reserving this money versus when there is a proposal being able to go forward with a new TID. So that was my
question as well.
question.
Okay.
Yeah, with Mike, that's my question / concern is we have probably a very bad budget issue coming our way over the next 24 months, I'm guessing, along with every municipality in this country. What is the benefit of keeping this open versus closing it and just opening a new one if an amazing
When it's
project
needed.
comes along?
Right. Yeah, that's right. Well said.
Yeah.
Can I make
Yes,
some
Dave, sorry,
comments?
go ahead.
I mean, to me, one advantage of doing this, if it were put in a trust for housing programs, whatever, is there's a lot more flexibility. You know, if we decide to do a grant program for seniors to put in grab bars and other things like that, we're not going to do a TIF district or something like that. Or if we decide to do, some kind of bonus for triplexes, or tear downs to do duplexes or triplexes or something like that. A TIF is for one particular type of big condo or rental project, but there's many other types of things and that we could do, that we could use some money in a trust fund for, that wouldn't require a TIF district. And creating a new TIF district is kind of, I think administratively it'd be a lot easier to be able to fund something from this than to go through the whole process of creating a TIF district. So I think it gives us a lot more options. It's a lot more flexible. And the second thing I want to point out, the email from Mark was talking about, I believe, 1 year of increment, the 2.5 million. But, from prior CDA meetings, when Ellers was here and talked about what happens when the TID closes, is that when the last debt service payment is made, whatever is left in the pot at that point, probably not 2.5 million, but some lower number. So it's an accounting thing of, this is how much is here. We don't have enough to pay our last payments, so we charge the increment again this year. Then we make the payment. There's some amount left. The amount left in the bucket after the last debt service payment is the amount that gets split up. So we're not talking about those in that 1 year. Okay, that's how they close out the TID. It's a 1 year thing. Okay, then after that you have the tax reduction. But so the numbers that were in Mark's memo were as if the entire year increment is divvied up, and that's not how it's going to be. It's going to be whatever is in the kitty when the last debt service payment is made. So those.
That's a good, David, that's a good clarification. I thought it was sort of the excess cash that's in the account, as well as the reason we're extending it is because we're taking that tax increment for that additional year into the new account. So it is it's actually the 2.5 plus any excess cash that was in the account after the final debt service payment was made. I thought that was the whole point of the extension, was we're basically grabbing that year. We paid it off, and now we're taking that next year of what would have gone to debt service, but doesn't have to anymore because the debt's paid off. So we do have 2.5 plus million. So I agree. That's an important point of clarification for the CDA.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying the comparison isn't, it's not saying either we take the money or the schools get 1 million and we get 700,000. That's not, I mean, if we do it, then the increment for that one, I mean, I don't actually, I understand how it closes out. I don't understand. Excuse me.
So
No,
is the memo from,
Well, I think I was speaking.
Yeah, no, David, your clarification, I understand what you're,
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, what happens, well, I mean, I'm guessing that the 2.5 million goes into an account, and at the end of that period, they do the same kind of closeout, but that money is still segregated off. So I'm not sure it would change the distribution. It would just be a year later, but I don't know for sure how the accounting works.
Just to make, really great point. You're right, because, it's not like the school gets, as you said, the $1.1 million.
Right.
They basically now get the new taxable rate that the TID is closed. Yes, you're right. There's not this big windfall.
Well, they will get a windfall, but the windfall's only what's left while Mark is here, so he can what's left in the kitty. I also want to point out the tax break to the schools gets adjusted through equalization aid from the state the next year. Right. So it's not like there's more money every year for the schools because the state says, oh, Shorewood, you're a rich district. Now you're even richer. We're going to take back state aid. And that's how school aid works. So, I mean,
Thank you
it will
for
be a benefit to the village, the county, MMSD, MATC. The state equalizes aid for school districts.
Thank you. That's good clarification. John, did you want to?
I guess David may be right, but I guess I would like to hear that from
Yeah,
Mark
that's more. Yep.
and understand, because that all sounds very confusing to me and not how I understood it. So
I've asked Mark to join the call, so I believe he's on now.
Well, you weren't on the CDA when we discussed the closure of the TID before,
Well,
so.
I was, and I'd like that explanation too. Thank you, Mark.
I don't know what the topic is. I just joined, so if you have a question, I'd be happy to ask.
Yeah, Mark, I think the clarification would be around sort of the closure process. What if we closed it, what happens? What does that look like to the taxing authorities? As David was saying, if there's any sort of excess cash in the account that wasn't required for debt service, that's the amount that gets distributed to the taxing entities. And then basically, just to clarify, we were saying there's $2.5 million. So the school gets 1.1 million, the village gets 700,000, but there isn't actually $2.5 million to split. It's just that it goes back into the taxing structure of the various municipalities. So looking for you to sort of clarify, I guess, that whole process under closure.
Okay, well, first of all, my email is predicated on the fact that you vote to extend the TID and then rescind it at a later date.
Okay.
That's what generates $2.5 million.
Yep.
There's nothing you do that's going to impact the distribution to the underlying districts because that's based on this year. So that's going to happen. I don't have the exact numbers figured out on that. But your actions are completely independent of that topic. So the $2.5 million distribution would be under the what if scenario is everybody wants to extend the TID and then nothing happens with the money and then you rescind the order to extend.
Well, then we do have the $2.5 million because we pulled it out.
We collected it next year. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. And then again, if we do close it, the amount that gets distributed is only the excess. If we closed it now or in the April normal time, then the only real distribution is any excess cash left in the debt service account, if you will, right after that final payment. Is that correct?
Well,
is that amount?
Again, I'm not prepared to discuss that amount. That's outside of CDA activities. It's going to be several $100,000 of residual funds that we're going to have at the village in our TID fund. That will be distributed when we have those final numbers at the end of this year. And it will be distributed pro rata based on the percentages of the tax bills listed here, because that's what generated the increment that's going to be residual. So again, I don't know what the tax distribution is going to be next year. We have to see what all the levies come in and so on and so forth. And but I'm just estimating for 2.5.
Okay. Mike, I saw your hand up first, and then David up.
Yeah, I would just say I'm just uncomfortable keeping this money and not having a firm project and not even knowing if we will, and trying to justify that to the other entities and to the village board in a time when we have economic issues. And all this same formula will apply if we create a new TID for another project. And then when we close that, so this is always the procedure, whether or not it's a new TID or this extension of an existing one. So I just don't see the advantage right now without a project to justify holding this money longer.
Well, I can just briefly comment on that before any other members want to weigh in is, this is an opportunity to capture that increment to be used for the purposes identified. We do not have a definitive spend down period on it. It is restricted money, and it's upfront. If that was the decision to be made by the village board to extend the TID, I mean, that would be money in hand. The whole concept of future TID districts is based on something happening, increasing values, generating revenues, assuming that the whole sort of momentum of a TID district will be sufficient to do that. Those are all very different questions. And for modest projects, it's hard to determine right now if that would make sense. So those are kind of the two differences between the new TID districts and taking advantage of this to have money in hand to spend on whatever applicable project might come up down the road.
David, did you have a?
So I just want to clarify, Mark, the distribution of the residual in the TID1 account is going to happen. This isn't affecting when that happens. This
That's
isn't
correct.
affecting that at all. Okay.
Okay.
But what it is affecting is the tax rate reduction would be delayed for a year.
That is correct.
Okay. And as I pointed out, the largest percentage of our tax bill goes to the schools, and that's really 6.5. The state's going to reduce aid. So
That's correct.
And okay, John, do you have a comment? Yeah, I guess the one thing I was going to say, and I don't want to, I mean, this is a great discussion, and this is exactly, I agree. This is not necessarily a rock in a hard place, but it is a challenging question for us, I guess. And I don't want to compartmentalize too much. I guess one way that I look at it is, again, we as the CDA have a certain, we have responsibilities, objectives, charter. And again, part of that is with respect to development, and now with respect to housing and affordability. And I hear what you're saying with respect to looking at the broader village and the challenges. I would argue to some degree, we need to keep in mind what our job is to then make the recommendation to the village board, who has the bigger picture and can then say, look, we hear you, that's important to you because that's your mandate. But as we look at the bigger picture, the greater need for the village is offsetting the taxes because of the financial crisis, because of everything going on. So thank you, but we've decided actually to close it. I feel like that's, again, I feel like it is our, I don't know, a job is too strong, but again, we have our charter, which is, we just went through all this stuff about affordable housing and the importance of all this. And to do that, we have no resources to do that just as we sit here. And here is an opportunity to actually obtain some resources. And as David has said, it gives us flexibility for some of those smaller things we want to do that I think could have a big impact on the village that aren't at a TID level, new TID level development, but are needed, smaller, again, fit and align with our goals and objectives. And I feel like that's where I don't want to go outside of it to say, look, we don't want to recommend because we feel like the village needs this elsewhere. Again, that's what the board's going to tell us if we go to them and recommend, and they can decline or accept that recommendation.
Question.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense, and I tend to agree with you, Peter, that our what is it? Our charter, our goal,
Mandate, charter, yeah.
our mandate is a little narrower than the village. Well, it's a lot narrower than the whole village board. So
Yes.
I guess we do need to keep that in mind. I am a little confused though about this discussion between all these, I guess we're calling them little options that give us flexibility, quote unquote, versus affordable housing creation. So are we doing this to have someone build brand new affordable housing, or are we doing this to have seniors put up grab bars in their bathrooms? Like, those to me sound like two totally different situations.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but I guess I would just say, that's a great question, John. I would say that part of the challenge is we just don't, at this point, we don't know. I think and Rebecca can chime in, I think in her discussions, as I'm remembering back, I think some of it, the recommendations that she heard was to do a bigger project, given staff constraints that we have in a smaller village. The bigger project might be the more logical for us to do, but I don't think that, I still think could be other opportunities smaller, but again, the point is, we don't have enough information to make that question. And so it does become a bit challenging too, in terms of a recommendation to the board. We're not giving the board as definitive a recommendation as I think we would like to. We're putting the board, I think, in a little bit of a challenging position, but
That's
that is
kind of what I think maybe, and Mike, I don't want to speak for you, you've got your hand raised, but just to kind of build on what I'm saying, if we don't have specific things we're trying to get done under this, and we're kind of all over the map, if we're defining affordable housing as everything from grab bars in seniors' bathrooms to building a 200-unit affordable housing complex, and on top of that, this money is just going to potentially sit there, not doing much of anything if no one comes along and does and proposes anything. I don't know. It is a tough situation, especially, I mean, if we didn't have COVID going on and we didn't have
Right.
a lot of other things that are about to hit the village's balance sheets, I guess, for lack of a better term. Although I do understand we have a fairly narrow mandate, it does seem like we can't just look at it in a total vacuum. We have to sort of say, all right, yeah, we don't really know what's happening. We definitely want to, and I don't think anyone here is against providing affordable housing in the village. We've already decided that that is something that we are in favor of. However, what that is, where that would be, if that is even something that's ever going to actually happen, we don't know. Like,
We don't know. Right.
I personally have my doubts whether or not a significant affordable housing complex would even get approved politically in this village. I mean, in theory, people all want it, but when the rubber hits the road, I'm not sure it's actually going to happen. When someone finds out that there's going to be 200 units or 100 units of affordable housing next to them, I think the tone might change in that block.
And that's kind of the unknown, right? I mean, that's the challenge right now, is we don't know answers to that. So I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, the 2 points. I do believe the CDA we have our own money, and we could do grab bars or small projects and not have to only rely on money from a carryover of a TID. I always thought TIDs are a fairly significant project that needs a gap, and the TID is able to provide that. But don't forget, we have our own funds. We have not used them. And those could be used for things like a grab bar program or something.
David, yeah.
Is that really true though? Because we gave the money for grants, we gave away to the businesses. And the remaining money, we talked about saving for a revolving loan fund. And I thought the CDA was pretty determined that we wanted to keep that for a revolving loan fund. So I don't know that we really have much.
We have the loan fund bucket. You're right. That's there. And then we have the administrative bucket that's paying the administrative. The facade program was used for the grant program. Exactly. So that's not available anymore. Yep.
You've got about 100,000 in administrative left.
Okay. I'm sorry, Dusty, you had your hand up a little bit ago.
Yeah, I had Mike had brought up some good points. The purpose of the TIDs were initially to convert blighted properties into tax relief for the entire village. The point that David had brought up about the money, school funding, things like that, going back into that would have a negative or a neutral effect on the amount of money that we would be able to collect by closing out the TID. But we did have some goals in mind for senior housing, affordable housing, tax relief, and energy efficiency that have an impact on how that money can be used if the TID were to remain open. And as I understand it, our role as the CDA is to make sure that we fulfill those goals in looking at the big picture. When you take a step back and look at other communities, we were given the opportunity to review other communities' structure, what the basis of their housing stock is as of last year, what the tax revenue for those communities are, and what the tax basis is because of those differences in the makeup of those housing units. We see a deficiency in the village of Shorewood for private single family or privately owned residences. I'm a big proponent for owner occupied properties. And I see a lack of that within our village. And focusing in on affordable housing, our affordable housing is based on what the income for the communities are. And our income levels aren't the lowest. They're also not the highest. And I think that there's a balance between what is affordable based on the averages of what our income base is in the village and what can be accomplished in regards to owner occupied housing. And it's there, and it's our job, whether the TIF is open or closed, it's still our job to look at those as options to make sure that what we have, the tools that have been given to us, are used carefully. And anybody in the real estate industry knows that there's a lot of things that can happen that communities aren't prepared for, increase and decrease in values. And a lot of commercial real estate developments have an edge because they're looking out 20 years into the future, and we don't have that foresight in our world. So it's a little bit of a slippery slope for any community to be involved in the real estate business. And that's exactly what a TIF district does, is it puts the community in a business that maybe they shouldn't be as involved in on a general basis. I think it should be looked at a little bit more carefully, using TIF districts, TID districts, to subsidize real estate development when it's the benefit of the residences and the owners themselves that these are created for tax relief. So if the residents aren't receiving the tax relief, then what's the point of having a TIF district or a TID? That's my question, and something that we need to discuss.
You mean like for the 1 year, if we were to approve it for the 1 year delay of the benefit
Correct.
point, the taxing districts?
Yes. Yeah, I would want to know. How we're, by keeping this open, are we really benefiting the village, and are we fulfilling the purpose of the original TIF district? Yeah,
and Mark can speak to this, but as I recall, the use of the proceeds has to be consistent with the project plan of the TID, which, you know, is fairly, no, is that not right? Am I not right?
Again, you know, in the context that we're discussing today, an extension for the use of affordable housing is a completely separate
Okay,
definition. So regardless of what the original project plan had in it, this acknowledges that there's an option to use for other purposes through an extension. So,
thank you. Yes. Mike,
And I just think we're in a, sorry. I think we are putting ourselves in a defensive position to have to justify at this point to the other taxing bodies, which will probably send representatives, I would think, to the board meeting where the vote is to be made, to justify to them why, you know, we feel it's necessary to to extend this when we don't have a project. So
that's a good
that's
point.
what I just don't get.
I believe all the taxing entities have to approve
Right,
the extension.
I think
Mark,
so.
yeah, no,
no. And again, just to reflect, the taxing bodies are unimpacted by your decision of whether to extend or not extend. It's really just whether or not, if the TID is not extended, then the incremental value of the TID gets released to the general tax rolls, general assessed values, which reduces the mill rate, which reduces property taxes. And at least for short term, you know, the school district and everybody's included now. Again, I've heard conversation that the school district and the state and their equalization are going to kind of a rubber band effect that, you know, 2 years down the road, then the state aid's going to be cut for the schools, which is going to require them to raise taxes. And that's, again, under the current funding formula, that's my understanding as well. But, you know, there's no money out of pocket for any of the underlying jurisdictions, regardless of your decision. All the distributions that they're entitled to will be dispersed based on this year's receipts at the end of this year. So that's completely neutral. They don't have to approve the village's action.
But it can't be neutral because if we close it out, then maybe not this year it's impacted, but the following year, there would be revenues returning to them.
No, it's just they're going to get their residuals from whatever we have, you know, cash in hand this year. At the end of this year, once we have final numbers, again, they're taxing in dollars, so they're going to get their dollars no matter what this decision is. It's the impact potentially to the homeowners on what tax base that those dollars are distributed across, either with or without an active TID1. So, but there's no additional revenues to be gained by anybody in that discussion.
Or state aid, Mark.
Can I
John,
just make,
yeah, so, okay. Here we go.
I just want to try to clarify, and Mark can tell me if this is wrong, but when we close the TID, so everybody's value, the value goes up. So, so for example, if we kept the village taxes exactly the same, what we levy exactly the same, because there's more value, it means that's where there's a tax savings to everybody, because we're now spreading that over a bigger base value. So people would see a tax decrease. But it's still, so I mean, on the other hand, the village could say, hey, we could keep the mill rate the same and levy this extra money on this base. Now, but there are things that get in the way of that, like our expenditure restraint program from the state, you know, so there's a lot of complicated things, but every taxing entity will still go through that same calculation of what is our levy. And then the mill rate is just comparing that levy to this new bigger base. And to the extent that any of us can increase our spending and so your tax rate could stay the same, but our spending could go up because we have this extra base to tax on. So that could happen too, but right now, the state doesn't really let us do it, doesn't let the schools do it because they have a revenue limit based on the number of resident enrollment there. So it's not that easy. I mean, I think there is some leeway in there, but it's not that easy for most taxing entities to just say, oh, I'm just going to grab that and spend more. I mean, basically, most of it is going to fall to the bottom line for taxpayers. Is that correct, Mark? Basically.
Yeah, and that's correct. And the other part of that is to the extent that MATC and MMSD might be involved in that, this issue is not even a blip on their radar with their tax bases being countywide. So, in general, I think, a vast majority of that is likely to fall to the bottom line. Now, obviously, we will disclaim that all things are never equal from one year to the next because there's likely to be some incremental increases next year that'll offset some of this tax relief, but it is still going to be tax relief compared to what it would have been had it been extended. So yeah, I think David, you summarized that pretty well.
So just to Mike's question, so under that structure, and that's very helpful clarification, but again, the beneficiary is the taxpayer, could be ultimately the taxpayer. It's not the taxing entities. It's how much am I paying on all the various buckets that I pay out. The taxing entity, as you said, might keep it the same, or they might modify it that could reduce mine. So Mike, does that clarify kind of where the benefit?
Yeah, but that's good to benefit taxpayers.
Absolutely, yes, yeah,
Right. Okay, thank you.
John, did you had your hand raised before?
Yeah, sorry. I guess what I was wondering was, and it sort of was answered by Davida's explanation and Mark, but it does there, if it's not this year, next year, it sounds like there would be, it sounds a few $100 to $400 tax benefit to homeowners in their property taxes in the village of Shorewood for a $300,000 house. I think the memo said. Is that correct? Or am I not understanding that?
Well, that's a current, back of the envelope estimate.
Right. So give or take, it's not an exact number, right? Okay. I was just looking for clarification on that.
Kathy, did you have a question?
I think I understand that, if we had this fund and we were able, if our goal was to, back to the grab bars for seniors, the question I have is implementing that, because of the size of our village, how do you implement that without losing most of it to administrative costs? Because it seems to me, I don't know, would we do that? How would we do that ourselves? It seemed to me you'd have to farm that out somehow, outsource the management of that program. And how would you not lose a lot of the money to administrative costs then? I like the idea a lot, but how does that work?
May I interject? This is Katie now, and I'm here on behalf of the Elder Services Advisory Board. So this has been an ongoing discussion with us, and I unfortunately don't have my notes in front of me, but there is a third-party organization that is willing to work with us on that. And it's something that we've been looking into and does appear to be feasible. So whether funding comes from this or something else.
I guess my question is just like, how much of it, what would be the return? Would you be paying 20 to 30% to this third party? Is it a nonprofit?
No, it's a nonprofit. So it's, I don't know the details of their funding model, but my base level understanding is that it's something that's grant funded on their end, and then they would support us as a village in completing those kind of projects, both identifying what's an appropriate project and then also finding contractors and managing that aspect of it as well.
Okay.
I can provide some additional.
I was just gonna say the flip side of this is obviously homeowners could take their savings from their property taxes and do it themselves, right?
Agree. Yeah. I mean, that was one of my thoughts, is if the goal is affordable housing, lowering property taxes moves in that direction as well. So, but
Thank
that's
you.
your guys' decision, not mine. I'm just commenting on the elder services piece.
Good to know. Thank you for the input.
Yeah.
Rebecca, did you have a?
Sure. With the program that she's referring to, they, in order to provide, first of all, it should be noted that the program Revitalize Milwaukee is available to everyone and all of our low-income seniors at this point in time for free. However, if the village wanted to establish a relationship with them, they have requested us to fund a part-time staff member between 25 and 35,000 annually in order to outreach and facilitate the program here. And then $100,000 to be invested in their account to be used on Shorewood residences. So Trustee Stobrand, to your point, there is a cost of administration.
And Rebecca, I believe that 100,000 would be for residents who don't otherwise qualify for their low income. Is that correct? That was my understanding. So it'd be
My understanding is that Elizabeth had desired to pursue providing the program to, in addition to low income seniors, more moderate seniors within the community as well. But I don't believe that the 100,000 it didn't distinguish between the two.
Okay, thank you.
Right now, the Revitalize Milwaukee only provides these services for free to low income seniors. So I guess there again lies the question of who are that the CDA or any group would need to answer. She had a desire to do it for low income, but then she also had a desire to do it for moderate income seniors in the community. I don't know how that was being defined.
And so
And
that part-time job, $25,000 to $30,000, that is no benefits, right? Because it's part-time.
I don't believe so. They weren't asking for us to have, it would not be a village employee. We'd be providing the funding to them to hire and have a part-time staff person.
And so you'd say, this is a 2-year program, something like that. You'd set parameters, what the CDA would contribute. The CDA would cut a check for $130,000, $30,000 to this nonprofit would go for the part-timer, and $100,000 would go for the projects. And then with the homeowners, it would be like a 1-to-1 payment kind of thing, or is that, I don't want to go into weeds.
I prefer not, Kathy. You know, I think this is part of our challenge is we're not at solutions yet. You know, we're basically, the question before us, I think, is, you know, we sort of have an option, right? We have an option to extend our window to do some analysis to decide if all of what we just talked about, you know, is there a process or a project within there that's viable that we'd like to pursue? And I hear, you know, Mike and John, I agree. We would have loved to have had more specifics at this point to be able to point to say, we want to do that. And, you know, we're not there. And so to me, the question is, do we want to hold that option for the flexibility for a year in order to see if there's anything in there that we could do? And, you know, again, to me, wearing the CDA hat, then making that recommendation to the higher board that has the bigger picture, that then can decide as they're prioritizing, they can say, yes, that is a higher priority than, you know, the impact to Shorewood residents on tax relief, whatever it is. I feel like that's the village board's call, not necessarily our call. So, you know, so again, there's a lot of hot air here a little bit, right, with the option, because I agree we don't have enough specifics, and we're kind of just trying to extend our deadline. That's really what we're doing here, and are we comfortable doing that in this environment? So, Mike, I know you had your hand up.
Yeah, I agree. And without extending it does not mean that we cannot work for this next year to put a plan and priorities together. And if it includes something that would warrant also a TIF, then that, is totally within our purview to put together and recommend.
Yes. Fair enough. And David, did you have your,
Yeah, I've made this comment before, and I don't want to, I'm not into virtue signaling and all that kind of stuff. But I just want it to be, on the record, that, issues about justice and equity have been at the forefront of everybody's thoughts over this past year. And when you look at residential segregation, basically, I mean, we are like 3.8% African American living next to a city that's more than 30% African American. I mean, and I did briefly look at the housing study, and it talks about the history of redlining in Shorewood and it's expensive now, more expensive than ever now. We've had higher increases in housing costs and rent costs in other places. So, I think we as a community have to start wrestling with that. And we are not gonna, we're not gonna be able to start addressing some of these issues, either residentially or in terms of school segregation and educational inequities and all these things. We're not going to be able to start. I mean, this relates to that struggle. So I'm not, like I said, I don't want to virtue signal. There are many more woke people than me in Shorewood. So I'm not trying to shame anybody. I just want to make the point that this does fit into the context of that. And my guess is, I don't know how it will go at the village board, but the same way the village board came back and said, no, we don't want to spend TIF on luxury housing. Okay. My guess is, but whatever, you guys are not the board, you can do what you want, but I do just want to point out in this discussion in public that this fits into a broader context, and we can think about that or not.
well, and David, just to follow up on that, and all of that requires funding to do all of that.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so here we, again, here there is it is a pool of money that is available to make this determination. And so I agree that, we have all these great goals, objectives, and the challenge always is money. And so here we do, so we have some money to achieve our goals. So again, just on David's point, sorry, John. And let's a few more, and then I feel like I think we're all probably have our beliefs and how we're going to vote on this. And
yeah.
I think we'll close out the conversation and then just do the vote and see where we are.
One last comment. I do, I agree with some of the things David had just said, although whether or not we extend this does not affect our ability to do anything to work on all those issues. And my feeling is, because we don't have anything even remotely available to spend this money on, I'm having a hard time justifying just keeping this open given the larger context of what is happening in the village and in the world. So although, this has been a great discussion, and I think I've learned actually a lot in the last 48 hours digging into this stuff again, which has been nice. I think, my feeling is that I don't see a huge benefit to extending this right now, especially because to David's, David, you sort of contradicted yourself, because on one hand, you're talking about giving people affordable housing, but then all these small projects don't necessarily, in my mind, give us affordable housing. That's what nice things to have. But when I think about affordable housing, I'm talking about building new units, build new buildings, or putting new units that are supposedly affordable to people. And that's, to me, what I feel like our mandate is, not so much some of these really small incremental things, which are nice and probably should be done as well by us and other entities in the village, like the Elder Services Committee and other things like that. I think these are great programs, but I'm not sure I can support extending the TID right now just mostly because we just don't have anything to extend it for, I guess. This is also theoretical, yet what's not theoretical is the actual money that will flow back to taxpayers in the village if we close it. So that's all that's all I'll say on that.
Kathy,
So we'll be facing the same question when TID 5 closes in 2023.
Who knows?
each one of them closed, we will
One
have.
would have an option for extension, right?
Yes,
Thank you. It's smaller one, obviously.
okay.
Chair Hammond,
Yeah.
Finance Director Emmanuelson has his hand raised.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yes, there it is. The virtual hand. I missed that. Sorry about that. He's using the technology. My bad.
Right.
Yeah, again, I appreciate you've had a thorough discussion on this, but one of the things that I've reflected on as being an outcome of the TID district, whether you supported the individual projects or not, whether some of this would have occurred with or without some of the TID incentives for facade programs and many other things in the TID 1 district. This tax relief is not just a one-year thing. The additional value attributed to this TID district is going to provide that tax relief. I don't want to say perpetually, but for many, many years to come. So again, the question becomes, do you try to capture from a one-year extension, or do you provide that tax relief in the current environment as being more critical? But that tax relief goes on for many years. So that was just my last comment.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, just one quick question, Rebecca, for you and your research of others that have extended. Did others extend without necessarily a definitive plan in place at the time, or is the more market practice that they did in fact have a specific thing they were planning to do at the time they extended? Do you have any visibility into that?
Both.
Okay.
There were some communities who had the perspective where they may have had a concept they were looking at. Some of those concepts fell through, and so they were waiting for COVID to pass to kind of go back to the drawing board because it's been a busy year. Others had a concept in mind, but I don't believe the majority of them, particularly if their entire community did not qualify for CDBG. Many of these communities did qualify community-wide, so they funneled those funds through their designated CDBG revolving loan programs. But those that did not, where the communities did not fully qualify for CDBG, they took some time to evaluate programs and really because the communities ability to do the programs and the programs themselves tend to be unique to the community. So by suggesting the CDA take a period of 12 months, should they desire to extend it, I think is reasonable because it will take us that time to lean into what and more clearly define what our values are and goals are in this area. And we haven't had an opportunity to do that yet. Since the release of the housing study, there were general concepts that were identified, but how, what goals we truly achieve by those, I think have still to be developed. So to answer your question, both.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Yeah, and I guess I'm worried on both sides with respect to the village board. I feel a little bad if we approve this to put something this, a bit open-ended in front of the village board. At the same time, I feel like if we don't pass this, we've taken one of the village boards, we've taken something away from the village board that I feel like to some degree is their decision in the bigger picture that we've been talking about. So with that said, I think we're at the hour already. I think it's time for a vote on this. And again, this has been a fantastic discussion. This is a challenging topic given the environment and everything else. So I appreciate everybody's open discussion of this. So do I have a motion?
I can make a motion.
Thank you, John. Do I have a second?
Well,
It's a
wait,
motion.
I didn't
Just-
take.
The motion, well, the motion has written, I move to extend, well, I guess it's, I
Here's
move to
Why don't
extend.
I say my motion and then you guys.
Okay.
Okay, so my motion would be, I move to not extend TID 1 for the purposes of affordable housing and recommend that the CDA develops a plan for utilization of the funds over the next 12 months. So I guess I can't, that's not right,
That's
actually.
not right. Just
So
saying move to not
basically, my
extend.
motion would just be to not extend TID 1.
Yes, period. I agree.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? I don't think so. Okay, so again, the motion is to not extend. All those in favor, aye, and or please raise your, or should we do a roll on that? I feel like we might want to do
Roll call.
a roll on this one. Yep.
Let's do a roll call. Amenta,
No,
Kraus,
Yes.
Lorino,
Yes.
Stokebrand,
Yes.
Dawson,
Yes.
sorry, I'm flipping through my screen.
Peter.
Hammond,
No,
and Lesage is absent. Sorry, I was looking for our seventh.
all right. So motion passes to not extend.
Correct.
All righty, thank you, everybody.
We'll take that forward to the village board on Monday, March 1st.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, again, it is ultimately the village board's decision? Okay. So they could decide what, so, okay, that conversation was just for, for purposes of our own education. The board can do whatever the heck they want, as is always the case. Okay, but that was a really good, I agree, really good discussion. Okay. I'm sorry, everybody, we're running a little over. The next item was economic development chapter and comprehensive plan update from, or sorry, well, I don't know if we take both of these, the housing chapter and the economic development chapter. I think we have Bart on the line. Just as a bit of preface for, you know, these are fantastic documents, and I will be honest, I did not have a chance to really fully review them prior to this meeting before I would have liked. I did review the recommendation section of that. So, but I believe, so Bart, why don't you jump in? I know you had talked, maybe there's the opportunity to delay this to the next meeting, or, but I want to make sure we fit in with your timing of when you want these to roll out.
Sure, and apologies, I'm not on my screen. I'm at my desk, which doesn't have a camera on my computer, so, but I am here. So yeah, to your point, Peter, so the CDA reviewed the draft chapters of housing and economic development back in September. The Plan Commission has reviewed all of the chapters. So just as a reminder, there are 8 chapters to this plan. The CDA has only been specifically asked to review housing and economic development based on your, charges. So the Plan Commission has gone through the entire 8 chapters back in August, September, and then we reconvened in January to do that. And Trustee Stokebrand is on the Plan Commission, so she can, confirm that. So where we're at right now is the last time you saw these 2 chapters, they were open-ended without recommendations, goals, or objectives. So at this point, working with your initial feedback and the feedback of the Plan Commission and other public engagement, I drafted the included goals, objectives, and recommendations. So at this point, I was just hoping to have a brief conversation or discussion as to whether or not these fit in with what you believe that you had mentioned, back in September. It has been some time. To your point of timelines, the Plan Commission is meeting again next Tuesday. I'll open to the public, so if you want to attend that and hear the whole conversation, you're more than welcome to. But the community is being presented these on March 17th at a public open house. And so whether we discuss them tonight, or you come on the 23rd, or we reconvene on March 5th, we still have opportunity to discuss all of that before the public open house, at which point those recommendations will be presented more publicly. So the 17th is the goal to have the CDA's comments by. And then March 23rd, the Plan Commission would have, the final re-review of every, comment that's been submitted with the goal of getting it to the board in April. So there would be time if you're willing to stick around today to go through those. I have, 6 slides. There's 6 goals presented. Or you could email them me separately. You can come to the Plan Commission. We could reconvene on March 5th. So I'll let it to you, Peter, as to what you see fit. But we can do it many ways.
Thank you, Bart. That was helpful. Let me just ask the group, has everybody had a chance to review in particular, again, so Bart, you are asking in particular for the goals, objectives, recommendations, those 2 sections. That's ideally what you would get feedback on today, correct? Because we did review, there's minor edits to the rest of the document. That's the material area. Has everybody had a chance to look at those, think about them, and have comments on them? And if so,
I've
then
looked at them, but I don't really have comments at this point. I want to look at them more carefully, but I read everything here, and that's where I developed some of my comments earlier.
okay. Again, I'm just kind of getting a poll here from the group. Do we feel like we're prepared? I have a fair number of mostly our questions or clarifications for me. I'm happy just to, I could share them to Bart directly and copy everybody on some of those questions, or I'm also trying to think, our March agenda, I'm not sure we have a lot, and it's coming up in basically we're meeting again in 2 weeks. So this could be one of the primary items we address at that meeting, which I think still meets Bart's timeline, as he said.
It would.
So I guess as I'm talking out loud, I feel like maybe we put this to the March timeline, everybody reviews it. So does that sound reasonable to everybody? I'll just look for sort of nods. And also with that, so I kind of want to maybe tag off of Destiny's point a little bit. I also reviewed them. I have no sort of material fundamental changes I would want to them, Bart, which I think maybe is partly what you're looking for as well. Most of mine are, again, clarifications or slight things, but nothing like this whole area doesn't make sense to me, or you need to add this whole thing. So I think I'm aligned with the direction that you're going here. And again, maybe I'll turn it to the rest of the CDA as well to see if they agree with that as well. If they had a chance to review, like Dusty said, he's got some questions, but he has no real fundamental questions, nor do I. John or Mike or David or Kathy, your thoughts on that?
I'd appreciate a little bit more time.
Okay. All right. Let's do that then. Good. Okay. Thank you, Bart. Sorry we couldn't give you more. on
Yep,
that.
no, they were ready, so we thought we'd put them on there in case we had time to discuss it. But yeah, the timeline does allow for March 5th to work, so I'll just plan on that. I'll let the Plan Commission know next week that you'll be taking another review at it before the open house, but we're still fine.
All right, great, thank you. Sorry, just getting back to the top. So I think that was items 3 and 4. So I think that does it for our agenda, right? Rebecca,
What
anything
time
else?
is our meeting on March 5th?
Yeah,
Is
I
it
was just
8 or
looking at
9 or
the
8:30?
We were presuming it would be at 9 o'clock.
9, okay, good, thanks. All right, got that on my calendar. I'll move to adjourn.
Have a second. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, everybody. Great meeting, great conversation. Really appreciate it. This is where we earn the big bucks, right? This is our, wait, we're volunteers, never mind. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Bye.